Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. Welcome to all of you watching from the US and overseas. I am really psyched for our study this week. This week, we will be reading together the sacred word of Masaaki-sama entitled A Glorious Future We Near. This sacred word was delivered by Masaaki-sama at the July 2022 monthly service at the national headquarters in Japan. This was just after the grand ceremony to celebrate the birth of the Messiah. In this week's reading, we would be not only gaining a deeper understanding of the grand ceremony, its purpose, meaning, but also the proper zoning as to how we should receive it. Furthermore, we are guided to a deeper understanding of what Meishu-sama meant by the perpetual flux of things and what it means to be ever-changing and growing. And this is just the beginning of this sacred word. There is so much more today and in the weeks to come. So stay tuned as we begin right after this. Let us begin this week's study by acknowledging that it is only by God's grace and Kyoshu-sama's permission that we are able to receive this sacred word and seek the true will of Meishu-sama, truly following in his footsteps. Let us, with this grateful heart, invite all our ancestors, all humanity, all of creation that are alive within us return to heaven during this study as ones who have been forgiven, saved, and resurrected, and are now being nurtured to become true children of God, Messiahs. It is with this thought in mind, with this sone, that I like to begin today's study with the church canon. Church canon. With great fear of God, we acknowledge that the Lord God is our true Father, the one and only God. We revere Meishu-sama as the model for all humanity and as our own example to follow. Meishu-sama, who was born anew as a true child of God, the Messiah, by receiving the divine will that God accomplished in heaven. We believe that Jesus Christ, who 2,000 years ago embodied the name of Messiah, the name most holy and high, is serving the Lord God in unity with Meishu-sama. We regard the sacred word of Kyoshu-sama, who reveals to us the will of Meishu-sama in this material world as the sole, absolute, and irreplaceable foundation in advancing our mission here on earth. Words of prayer. God, I acknowledge that you are alive. Within me, you are alive. I thank you for nurturing me to be newly born as your child. May this blessing be shared with all. In the name of Messiah, which is one with Meishu-sama, I surrender myself to you. Please use me as you wish. Thank you very much. So as part of our study, every week we have an Instagram post that we choose. And this week I chose the following Instagram post. This Instagram post was from Kyoshu-sama's sacred word in 2014 when he visited members from the regions of Hokuriku and Kansai. And in the sacred word, Kyoshu-sama shares the following: wrongly assuming that we own our sense of I, we have been utilizing it freely, judging ourselves and others. God forgave such an attitude of ours. Wrongly assuming that we own our sense of I, we have been utilizing it freely, judging ourselves and others. God forgave such an attitude of ours. Kyoshu-sama. When I was reading on Instagram, I felt this matches and fits so well with the sacred word that we'll be receiving today from Masaaki-sama. In this sacred word, Masaaki-sama truly breaks down for us this I, right? What is this I that we took possession of, as Kyoshu-sama is showing here, right? The very reason that we needed to be forgiven by God. And what is that relationship between us and God, and how to truly serve God today, following Meishu-sama's footsteps, right? Really learning from Meishu-sama and following. So I don't think we'll get to this part of the sacred word today, which is okay because we'll be reading for the next couple of weeks. But, reading it in its entirety, even if we just read part of it today, I recommend you take the link that's being shared in the description here and study it, and read it many times over so that when we get to next week and the next parts of this sacred word, we can exchange comments and questions and really seek to receive this true will of Meishu-sama through the holy seat of Kyoshu, through the sacred words of Masaaki-sama that we'll be studying this week. So with this thought in mind, that I'd like to begin the reading with you right now. So this is the sacred word of Masaaki-sama, a glorious future we near, July 1st, 2022. Kanon will come from the place most high and descend to the place most low. Then Kanon will climb up to the place most high again. Sermon, May 1st, 1935. Hello, everyone. It is very hot today, isn't it? As usual, I will be speaking at length, so please feel free to drink water or go to the restroom as necessary. I wonder if you can hear my greeting in the restroom. So yes, please relax as you listen. The grand ceremony to celebrate the birth of the Messiah happened just a little over 2 weeks ago. And frankly speaking, I was wondering how each one of you feels now. As for myself, I came to today's service with this feeling, this passion, this fire burning within me 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times stronger than what I had at the time of the grand ceremony to celebrate the birth of the Messiah. And if I didn't have that feeling, it wouldn't be fair to all of you who came here in this hot weather. God, too, of course, is an existence that is eternally evolving. Today, more than yesterday. Tomorrow, more than today. The day after tomorrow, more than tomorrow, and so on. Meishu-sama also spoke about the perpetual flux of things. The present you is different from the 1 year ago you. The world today is different from the world yesterday. Not only that, he said that there is actually a difference between the present you and the 5 minutes ago you. Just making a quick pause, right? For some of us who've been members maybe for a little bit longer, right, might know this sacred word. Some of you watching today, this might be the first time you're watching, right? But look at what Meishu-sama is talking about. It's Masaaki-sama cites here, right? The perpetual flux of things, where the you of this moment is actually different between the you from yesterday, from a month ago, from a year ago, and from 5 minutes ago, right? Constantly changing, constantly evolving. This is very, very different than how we usually see the world, is it not? And Masaaki-sama goes into this, and this is really exciting. So Listen to as he explains here. He says, and he said that if you do not evolve as such, just as muddy water is stagnant, you will be left behind, sitting longer and longer. Now, if this is the case, let's take a look at the grand ceremony to celebrate the birth of the Messiah. Rather than 5 minutes ago, it happened more like hundreds of minutes ago, thousands of minutes ago. Postscript, upon calculating, it was actually over 20,000 minutes ago from the day that the service took place, right? 20,000 minutes ago. So if you consider the time that has passed since then, things definitely should have evolved until today, as everything is perpetually in flux at all times. Now that the grand ceremony has ended, you might think it's time to take a breather. You might think, oh, there's a minor service today. It's just a July monthly service. But I don't think it's like that. How many of you watching here today have had that thought, right? After the grand ceremony, given the name, given its enormity, right? Over 10,000 people participated just in Japan for this ceremony, right? So after that grand ceremony, how many of us thought the service following that was actually a smaller service, a minor service? Right? I think many of us have had that kind of thought and reflection, right? Well, it's not the same. It's not as big, right? It's a minor service. But look what Masaaki-sama shares with us here. He says, or some may think, that although the grand ceremony has ended, the world hasn't changed at all, or we ourselves haven't changed at all. Nothing has changed. And that's fine. Although the world has not changed, our own thoughts and feelings have changed. So that's good. But that's not it either. Normally, we wouldn't think there's a big difference between the present you and the 5 minutes ago you, right? But Meishu-sama saw the world and his own existence differently. If God is always evolving, and if that God is within me, there must be something different between the present me and the 5 minutes ago me. And then if we think, even though the grand ceremony has ended, the world has not changed, then the world will, in fact, not change. That's because our thoughts create the future. If we think that nothing has changed, then nothing will change. But if we think something is becoming new, or something has become better, then God may give you that kind of future. That's because our own thoughts, humanity's thoughts, are creating the future. Now, this is a point I really am excited to receive with you, right? And read with you. And I like to actually go back a few slides as we look into what Masaaki-sama is sharing with us, right? Because he's saying from here, he says, normally we wouldn't think there's a big difference between the present you and the 5 minutes ago you, right? But Meishu-sama saw the world and his own existence differently, he says, right? We usually have the tendency, and we look at one another, we look at the situation as we're seeing here, right? And the situation hasn't changed. The world hasn't changed. Problems still continue. Conflict still continues. Disease still continue, right? We live in that mindset, do we not? How many of us actually even for example, looked at ourselves, at one another, and says, well, I've always been like this. I can't come out of this, right? I'm not changing, right? But why is it that Meishu-sama saw that the present him is different from the 5 minutes ago him? Masaaki-sama shares here when he says, if God is always evolving, and if God is within me, there must be something different between the present me and the 5 minutes ago me. Now, when I first saw Meishu-sama's sacred word regarding the perpetual flux of things, right? And the fact that we have to always constantly evolve, constantly grow. I always looked at it in a very superficial way, right? Very to the letter. I have to constantly be learning. I have to constantly be growing. I have to constantly be doing, right? I, me, Igor, am the center of the world, my world, and I have to do. I've never thought about it in the light of, as Masaaki-sama is showing here, how Meishu-sama saw it, which is God himself being alive within us. God himself constantly evolving, constantly changing. So even if I don't see the change at this moment, God himself is evolving. God himself is changing. But this is a world of difference from how I used to receive this sacred word. And with that, we can see what Masaaki-sama is showing here, where he says, and then if we think, even though the grand ceremony has ended, the world has not changed, and the world will in fact not change. That is because our thoughts create the future. Now, when we look at this, we have to take into consideration what we just saw in the previous slide, which is God himself being alive within us, right? This can easily be mistaken into ideas like people say, right? You attract what you think, right? Laws of attraction, where you are the center, you are the one doing, you are the one growing. But here, this center within us, we are talking about God himself alive within us. I believe there's a difference there from what the world talks about as you are attracting things, right? Because Masaaki-sama shares here and goes even deeper, where he says, if we think that nothing has changed, then nothing will change. But if we think something is becoming new or something has become better, then God may give you that kind of future. Right? That's because our own thoughts, humanity's thoughts, are creating the future. It's not something you are attracting, it's the very thoughts that are creating that future, right? Because that very God is alive within you. And it also makes us stop to think about how we deal with our thoughts. Do we not? How are we facing our thoughts? Right? Because they come unstoppably, right? They're just there over and over. Many, many thoughts. How do we see those thoughts? I think forever, until receiving the sacred words of Kyoshu-sama, the sacred words of Masaaki-sama, we never truly could grasp, even if a little, this mechanism of our thoughts, how it works, right? Why is it that we're thinking? Why is it that we're feeling? This is one of the things in this sacred word that's so special, is Masaaki-sama really breaks it down for us, what it is that we are here for, what it is and how it is that we're supposed to serve. What is this relationship between us and God, right? As we're going to see later on in this sacred word regarding God human, which I'm really excited to read in the next weeks to come with you. But really taking this in a little bit right now, right? Our thoughts, humanity's thoughts are creating the future. And he continues, as such, God is eternally new. He continues to get newer and newer and newer. Meishu-sama is also this kind of person, isn't he? If evolving eternally were a graph, it would look like a line that rises to the right forever. The line wouldn't come back down, right? You have that line going straight up, right? And rising forever and not coming back down. But if we were to put what humans actually feel onto a graph, it would first look like an upward line. The time we were born until our 20s or 30s. Then after that, the line would start declining, wouldn't it? I mean, once we hit our 30s and 40s, myself included, our knees start to feel a little stiff. Our bodies begin to show signs of wear. Then, as we keep aging, we, of course, begin to get various illnesses. Illnesses. That's the case. Then the graph showing a human being experience does not match God's graph with a line rising to the right forever. I mean, God's graph shows eternal advancement. Our own graph shows a complete downhill course. These two simply don't match up, do they? It's true that when we look at babies, we feel they have unlimited potential. Or when we look at someone in their teens, we see how they figure out what they want to do and then work hard at it. In that way, God is evolving eternally and is making the future through these young people. We can picture these kinds of things, right? But I'm sure Meishu-sama isn't talking about that. Ultimately, everyone becomes the downhill graph. A human body has a lifespan, after all. Then there's cancer, the illness called cancer. There is the view that this too, of course, is a terrible disease. Or there's the view, as Meishu-sama taught, that this is a purification. It is a good thing. It is protecting against something that is more serious. It is to maintain the body and to help us live longer. These kinds of various illnesses are developing within our bodies for our good. What a blessing this is. Just a quick pause, right? Look at how different Meishu-sama's point of view of illness is to the rest of the world, right? In Meishu-sama's point of view, with everything we can see now so clearly through Masaaki-sama's sacred words, that it is opposite to the way the world thinks in everything, right? And here, illness is no difference, right? The various kinds of illnesses are developing within our bodies for our good. They are a blessing, right? They're cleansing. It is a cleaning process of what we are basically intoxicated with, right? So it is a huge change and blessing for us. And Masaaki-sama continues. But it is not only that. Including all the above, there is an even bigger view. Right? So we see Meishu-sama's view of this eternal change, perpetual flux, like God's, right? God's becoming eternally new. And we see that different from the way the humans see the world through their feelings, right? As we reach their 20s and we start going down, as our body starts having a lot of issues and going bad. And Meishu-sama, the opposite, saying all these illnesses are actually trying to make you healthier, right? There is even a bigger view Masaaki-sama is sharing here. And he shares with us, there is no doubt that after a certain age, our bodies start deteriorating. On the other hand, God evolves eternally. If we look at this through the lens of our own experience, our life graph will never match up to God's graph, right? Even if you were told that you are evolving eternally, maybe you have a certain disease, or perhaps your mother has dementia, it's almost impossible to believe that we can eternally evolve, isn't it? While we may see it like this on the outside, in actuality, we, our true selves, are always evolving, growing younger, more and more and more. I'm going to read this slide one more time, okay? Look what Masaaki-sama is sharing for us here, right? While we may see it like this on the outside, in actuality, we, our true selves, are always evolving, growing younger, more and more and more. There's the apparent figure that I see of myself, right? The outside, expressed through this body, through the situations that I'm going through, and illnesses, and this body getting older and deteriorating with time. But then there is the true self, our true self within us that is always evolving, growing younger, more and more and more. We are continuously getting younger at this very moment. And that's because God is a being who is evolving eternally. And this God exists within us. Everyone, I'm going to read this point one more time. We are continuously getting younger at this very moment. And that's because God is a being who is evolving eternally. And this God exists within us. Our true self, that is getting younger and younger and younger, is the very existence of God within us. This here, no one has seen it this way, have you? Without the sacred words of Masaaki-sama, without the sacred words of Kyoshu-sama, I would have never thought of this in this way, right? We say that God is alive within us, right? But for me, for example, a long time, even saying that, there is a part of me that's constantly separating myself from this God that's alive within me. In other words, God is alive within me, but it's not me, right? It's separate from me. But look at what Masaaki-sama is sharing with us. We are constantly getting younger at this very moment. And that's because God is a being who is evolving eternally, and this God exists within us. Furthermore, he shares, well, I can definitely see how this is difficult to believe. After all, our bodies are very important to us. So we can't help making that the main focus. Isn't that how we've all lived till now? Making our bodies the main focus, right? When we are in an illness, when we have a difficulty, when we're going through something, we go into worry, into despair, and say, oh my God, I'm sick. Oh my God, this is happening, right? And that becomes our main thoughts that consume our everyday, is it not? And as Masaaki-sama sharing here, extremely difficult to believe in what we just read, right? Look as he shares with us. But if you look at Meishu-sama's be new always, he says we should constantly become new. So within ourselves, we are actually getting younger and younger. This is true for everyone, always becoming new, always getting younger. Like I shared a few minutes ago, right? When we read, or I read years ago, Be New Always from Meishu-sama, I've never in any time reading that thought about God alive within me, becoming new always, younger and younger and younger. Be new always to me, be new always, its meaning to me meant I have to grow and learn. I have to study new things. I have to be up to date with the most recent technology or ideas or thoughts, right? It was constantly focused on this external world and making this body and this physical experience evolve, right? Let's put it that way. But never looking at the true self that's within us, right? This self that is always getting younger and younger. Look what Masaaki-sama is sharing here with us. Meishu-sama says, but if you look at Meishu-sama's Be New Always, he says we should constantly become new. So within ourselves, we are actually getting younger and younger. This is true for everyone. Always becoming new, always getting younger. If you think about it in this way, today's monthly service isn't a small scale monthly service that is happening after the grand ceremony. It's actually something that has evolved since then. From our human eyes, the grand ceremony to celebrate the birth of the Messiah would be at the very top, and the monthly services would be below that. But in actuality, today's monthly service has evolved since the grand ceremony, for the world is accomplishing an ever-evolving growth. Who of us ever thought of the services in this way, right? This service this month evolved from the service in the previous month. The service in July of 2022 actually evolved from the service, the grand ceremony to celebrate the birth of the Messiah. And look what Masaaki-sama shares. He says, so it's not that the grand ceremony is higher in rank and today's monthly service is lower. Regardless of the scale of today's service, regardless of the number of participants, this is the July monthly service that surpasses the grand ceremony to celebrate the birth of the Messiah. To rank these services in scale is a human-centered point of view, a point of view that revolves around the outside world, a point of view where the line on the graph ultimately declines. But it is not that. Today we are participating in a service that has further evolved since the grand ceremony. And if we do not attend with that thought in mind, I don't think we'll be able to receive God's blessings. This changes the way we see the world, does it not? To start with, it changes the way we see the services, right? What feelings, what thoughts, what attitude am I going to the next service now, right? As we see that the service has evolved more than the previous service. And Masaaki-sama shares something here in this previous slide where he says to rank these services in a scale is a human-centered point of view. A point of view that revolves around the outside world, right? We put them in this scale and this number, and we try to compare and see one another, right? A point of view where the line on the graph ultimately declines, right? Because we see, oh, it's growing, it's not growing, it's getting, weaker and smaller, right? Like our bodies, very human point of view. But in God's point of view, it is eternally evolving, eternally growing, and eternally getting newer and newer. This is huge, right? It's a whole different way to see the world, to see everything about our lives. Wouldn't you agree? And if we don't attend the service with that thought, we will not be able, as Masaaki-sama says, I don't think we'll be able to receive God's blessings. This is truly a very special sacred word. And I'd like to stop the reading for it here this week as we try to take this in a little bit, right? And truly receive the meaning of this, right? How we've seen the world up until today. As we saw in the previous slide, right? A very human-centered point of view. A point of view that revolves around the outside world. A point of view where the line of the graph ultimately declines. To the true point of view that Meishu-sama is trying to bring us when he's sharing be new always and the meaning of that and what it means by God being alive within us as he's sharing that with us as well. This is also very, very important for us to reflect on and think about. And we are so blessed, and I can't say it enough, that we are receiving this sacred word and guidance to truly follow in Meishu-sama's footsteps, to truly understand Meishu-sama's will. Like I mentioned to you before, right? I never in a million years would have realized that Meishu-sama's sacred word, be new always, is only understandable if we start to look at the fact that God is alive within us. God who exists within us is our true self, right? And even more so, the responsibility that we have for our thoughts we're having on a daily basis, right? How we are dealing with those thoughts on a daily basis. And here in the sacred word, Masaaki-sama guides us to how to truly align ourselves with this Meishu-sama, who is one with God, one with Jesus Christ, and constantly evolving, constantly becoming newer and guiding us in that process as well. Thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to continuing this reading with you next week. May all honor, may all glory be returned to God always.